As many of us know, transitioning on our own is difficult enough. But what about transitioning while in a long-term romantic relationship? Today I'm going to share my experiences of doing just that. Hey everyone, so today we have another special treat for you. As you can see, Cole returns. Hello! Today he's going to interview me on my experiences of what it was like for me to transition while I was in a long-term relationship.
Oh shit, is that what we're doing? Okay. All right. Well, hello everybody. It's lovely to be back with everyone. So let's go ahead and jump right in. Shut up, Chloe. Chloe, most of the people who have seen your videos probably already know a little bit about you at least, and kind of know who you are. But could you start maybe just by telling us about yourself and kind of telling us about the topic at hand?
As many of you know, my name is Chloe. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I am a lesbian transgender woman. And, I've been out for almost 5 years now. And the experiences I'll be talking about today is when I was dating a long-term partner. We started dating in about 2013, and we were together till the end of 2015. About halfway through that relationship, I started my transition, and we're going to be talking about what that was like.
So you said that you, about halfway through that relationship, you started to transition.
Mm-hmm.
So can you kind of tell us what that was like and kind of what was going through your mind when you did that?
I think I started dating her probably March, April 2013. Started my transition with coming out to her was kind of one of the first steps in about September of 2014, and we were together until about November of 2015. So it was really right in the middle of the relationship. And really what was going through my mind is just, looking forward to my future, like I've talked about, and seeing that I didn't want to grow old as a man. That's just gone so many years of just making these wishes of wishing I'd wake up the next day as a girl. And I felt comfortable in this relationship, and I had told her some of these things in months prior, that I had these desires to be a girl, that I cross-dressed was the way I had framed it to her and a few past partners, because that felt easier and less of a permanent change. And she was supportive of that. We both very much loved each other. I kind of just took it to the next step, I guess, and was like, well, actually, these things that I told you, I actually want to at least try to live my life as a woman. Because I was finally figuring out that being trans and transitioning is actually something that I could do.
It's a big step.
Yeah.
Yeah. So can you talk a little bit about kind of what that felt like when you decided to tell her?
I can kind of remember it. I think I told her when me and her and a couple of friends were actually on a camping, rafting trip one weekend, and I think it was that liquid courage of alcohol that helped me just for some reason be like, hey, remember this time I told you about how I wished I was a girl? I think I actually want to transition. I don't think I was super terrified to say it at the time, and I probably really fumbled my words just because I didn't know how to explain it, and because I was probably drunk. But
that helps.
She was very, very supportive when I told her, and emphasized that she wanted to do everything in her power to support me and do what we need to do to stay together. But I think that process got harder for us, especially in the coming days and weeks when it started to settle in of for me of okay, I need to figure out what I need to do to start this journey. And for her, from what she's told me, of kind of just oh shit, this is actually real.
Mm-hmm.
This is actually going to happen. And I think at that point she was still very supportive of me, but I think she was a lot more conflicted.
Okay. Yeah, so she was supportive of you going through the transition and having that experience, but she was conflicted about kind of where she was coming from or what she wanted.
Yeah, kind of conflicted about what does this mean for our relationship. She's like, I'm happy for you and I want you to live as yourself, but what is this going to do to our relationship? Because for all intents and purposes, I identified, because I didn't know what else to do, but I identified as a straight guy. The world told me as a guy, and I was always attracted to women, and I was in a relationship with, a straight woman. And so me transitioning to live my life as a woman, that can create a bit of a barrier there if, she has never been in a relationship with a woman and she has no desire to date women. And I think that was one of her big concerns of just like, she still loved me, but that physical attractiveness piece really wasn't there.
And that became more apparent as you transitioned?
Definitely. Because I think it's kind of like a weird way in terms of like, the more validating she was of me, the more our relationship fell apart. The fact that she wasn't attracted to me as much anymore in a weird way was kind of validating towards my identity, but was very difficult in terms of like our relationship staying together. And I do really appreciate the fact that, she was very supportive of me despite the fact that, we could both tell that the relationship wasn't going to last long term.
It also sounds like there was a lot to manage and navigate. So I guess I'm curious how did you handle that? How did you navigate everything as stuff popped up?
As I've mentioned in previous videos, like I like to plan everything. So as soon as I like came out to her and was like, okay, what do I need to do? Like, and I talked about how like my first step was figuring out therapy and kind of just like figuring out these transition steps and like going to therapy, starting hair removal, going to a support group. I think one thing that made each of these steps easier is that she was, usually there for me along the way. Like, it was difficult for her to show up to some events and to be out publicly with me in some ways just because she wasn't sure how to navigate being suddenly in, what looked like a lesbian relationship. Just not something that she was ever used to or ever thought would happen. And same for me. But I can say that like having her there, being able to like do things like going shopping with me, going makeup shopping, clothing shopping, going to support groups with me definitely made those earlier steps much easier, especially when I felt like, I still struggle feeling like I passed, but I know back then, like I especially struggled with it, like not knowing what the hell I was doing with makeup, not having any changes from hormones or surgeries, wearing wigs. My clothes didn't fit me as well then just because my body had not changed. Having her there with me, like, still made it really hard to be out in public, but it was a lot easier just having somebody that could focus on me, I could focus on them and the world around me, and those problems could melt away to an extent.
So you had some like backup when you were out.
Yeah, and I truly believe that like if I was just on my own, not in a relationship at the time, I think my transition would have taken a lot longer because some of those initial steps I wouldn't have had that person like metaphorically and literally holding my hand and just being like, it's okay. Or, I could pick out clothes and then she could like check out at the register.
Yeah, so it sounds like just having her presence and having her actually do stuff during that process, like physically be there and help you with stuff was pretty helpful.
Definitely.
Okay. Was there anything else that she did during that process that you like found especially helpful that, maybe if viewers are in this situation, things that they could do to better support the person who's transitioning?
Very just a lot of unconditional love that I could feel there. Like we had a very strong relationship before I came out and we continued to have that for a while. She created that space before I came out that allowed me to come out in many ways of just like feeling like I could be myself with her, feeling like that, she loved me no matter what. And I think that was very critical for me, like feeling like, okay, this is something I can do.
So she like created safety. It sounds
right.
Like.
And kind of continued that as it went on in terms of like, helping me navigate like those experiences of going out in public, helping me navigate coming out to some of our mutual friends, sometimes even coming out on my behalf when I didn't feel comfortable doing so. And she never did it without my permission, which is super important as well. Yeah. Because, I truly believe we should have control over our own coming out of experiences, but early in our transitions, it can be very, it's always terrifying coming out to people, but it can be especially so when we're still like in that area of really navigating who we are. And she was able to take off a lot of that pressure in that first year. She was there with me when I came out to my brother and his wife. She was there with me when I came out to my parents. And those experiences, she told me later that like, I didn't feel like it was my place, but I wanted to go off on how shitty that some of their reactions were primarily my brother and his wife. I think she understood enough to like be respectful and not make it about her. And she was with me for that. When I started therapy, when I started hair removal, she was with me when I went to my first support groups. She was with me for so many of my coming out experiences, not just my family, but coworkers and friends. There when I started hormones. There when I came out. She wasn't actually at my job, but we were together still when I came out at work. So many of those like early milestones, but they're not like fun milestones.
She was critical, it sounds like.
For sure.
And there for a lot of it.
Okay. I think I'll forever be thankful for her.
Yeah, that's incredible. I guess the kind of second half to that question is, are there, and you don't have to talk necessarily to things that she may have done or may not have done, but are there things that would have been less helpful or things that you wish could have gone differently, perhaps, like during that process with your partner?
I think one of the hardest things, and you kind of talked about it too, is just that, like, you know, she's not trans, she's cisgender, so she couldn't always understand my struggles. You know, so like when I was feeling especially dysphoric and having days where it's just like, I did not want to go outside, or like, my makeup just, I could not get it right, or my outfit didn't look good, and I kind of just wanted to cry and stay in bed. Like, there were some times where she didn't quite understand what was going on with me. Like, she could tell I was upset, but I don't think she understood the extent of it. And I couldn't always verbalize it either, because it was kind of just like, I'm extremely uncomfortable, nothing's working, can we just stay home? And I think there's that compounded piece of not only do I feel like I look like shit, I feel like other people are going to notice that and say something too, which makes me even less want to go out. Not helpful that she didn't understand it, but it's also like, I don't blame her for not understanding it. And I think in some ways, like, there is a helpful nature to her, like, kind of sort of like pushing me to like go out into the world too, and not just like completely coddling me, because I don't think that would be helpful either.
Okay.
So I think there's a balance there in terms of like, yeah, it sucks and it feels shitty and everything, but it's like I do have to eventually go out into the world and live my life. Like all things in life, balance.
Okay. Yeah, so so having that support, but also having someone who could push you a little bit in a way that was probably safe, I assume, and still felt comfortable. But, you know, I think that's a big statement, that you still have to live your life and you do still have to go out. It's something you probably had to learn how to navigate.
I mean, I'll probably never forget, this is probably one of the worst nights of my life. This was Valentine's Day, 2015. And I think this is when, like, it really dawned on me how supportive she was. Where we went to, you know, I was living in Gainesville at the time. We went to St. Augustine, it's about an hour and a half away, cute little historic place. You know, we went there sometimes to like go out to dinner and stuff like that. And, you know, we went to like a fancy restaurant. And this was one of my first times like really being out in public as Chloe. Things went well when we went out to dinner. We decided to like go to like a little bar, listen to some live music afterwards. And this older couple sat down next to us, and the woman seemed fine. She was a little weird. And then the husband started talking, and that's when it went all to shit. Where he essentially, from what I remember, said like, you know, oh, why do you have to come here and do that? Talking about how I was dressed.
What?
Like, right to my face. He was probably sitting almost as close to me as you are sitting to me. Like, I was on a couch and he was on like a couch perpendicular. And I think one part that was even more upsetting is that his wife kind of just like laughed it off. And I'm like, I could tell that like she thought it was fucked up, but she didn't want to like, I guess, go against what he was saying.
Wow.
And that conversation just kind of progressed, and eventually I just had to get up and go to the bathroom. And of course, on my way to the bathroom, somebody at the bar said something shitty to me and misgendered me. And
jeez,
I was basically just like frantic. And I went up to Chelsea, my partner, and was like, can we just leave? And she just like put on, you know, the boss pants and was just like, all right, we're going to check out now. And took care of me.
Wow.
And like basically was just like got all firm and like, give me the bill now. And then like just took my hand and we went out. And
wow.
the next like 20 minutes was us just like walking through the neighborhoods with me crying. Super wonderful. But the fact that she, I didn't even have to directly like tell her much, but she knew that like we need to get out of here.
Yeah.
Because I just was falling apart.
Wow.
And she was just there and supportive for me, and just like apologizing, and even though it wasn't her fault, but just like being so sorry for what happened. And basically it was just like, if you want to, we can just go home now. And I was like, no, we're going to the movies. Because I'm stubborn.
We're recovering from this.
But then I was like, we're not seeing fucking 50 Shades of Grey. We're seeing what I want to see.
Love that journey.
But that was just like such a, I think, key experience early in my transition, that it was awful, but I think it could have been so much worse if I was either on my own, or, my partner didn't handle it well, or just didn't get it.
Yeah. It sounds like she kind of just intuitively knew how to be helpful, and maybe not to fix the situation, because it doesn't sound like there was much fixing it, which is how crappy people were being, but she knew how to be present and how to be there for you.
And neither me or her are like up in your face like, you can be cool. Like, we're not gonna be like, fuck you.
Slap someone right in the mouth.
Kind of introverted and be like, you want to make them mad, but inside I'm like, I want to rip your head off.
Yeah. So you all found a way to to do it in your own style, not to snap off like I would. Okay. Whew, big stuff. Like, damn. Well, I'm glad that she was, I'm just glad in general that she was there for you that night, especially that night with how rough it sounds like it was.
Yeah.
But, so you mentioned that kind of during this process, she was navigating her identities, it sounds like, in the sense that like she was a straight female, or identified as a straight female, and you kind of had your own identity stuff that you had to manage. So I'm curious how, during your transition, kind of how you arrived at the way that you identify, and and what that was like in the context of your relationship with her.
Honestly, I think it's something that neither of us had really thought about before I started transitioning, because it's kind of that thing of like, you're the default. The world sees you as heterosexual, and it's most straight people don't have to think about that, because it's just kind of taken for granted.
Yeah.
And I think it was my transition that kind of sparked that dialogue for both of us. And I didn't immediately be like, all right, I'm lesbian. Because that was definitely something I navigated a bit, because, I've heard many stories of people transitioning, especially after like hormones, of their sexual orientations kind of shifting, or just being more in a space where they can embrace what their sexual orientation truly is. So I kind of didn't put a label on that for a while, because I kind of just wanted to see, if anything would shift. Because, my whole life prior to that, I had been attracted to women. Just considered the idea that maybe I'd be attracted to men. But that never really came to fruition, thankfully. And I just realized throughout like the whole relationship that I was still very much attracted to her. And even after we eventually broke up, I was still only attracted to women. And there were even a few times where like I made out with guys just as like a way to see, and I was just like, this isn't that great. Yeah. This does absolutely nothing to me. Like,
this is not fun.
No offense to the handful of guys that I've made out with, but usually the way I describe it is just like, I am overwhelmingly bored right now.
Oh gosh!
Because it just like does absolutely nothing for me.
Spill the tea, girl.
And I'm just not a fan of also kissing people with lots of facial hair. It's just not fun. Cool. It would not work for you there.
Yeah. Both of us would be like, don't touch me.
Social distancing before it was cool. I eventually came to the idea of identifying as lesbian probably late in our relationship, maybe even after we broke up, after I came out full time.
Okay.
Just because I was like, I'm still attracted to women. I identify as a woman. That seems to be what fits.
Wow.
And for at least 4 years now, I've identified as a lesbian.
Okay. And so you said that, just to, I guess, clarify, you were out full time after you all broke up?
Yeah,
Okay.
so it kind of coincided. We
Okay.
unfortunately did not stay together,
Hmm.
but I ended up coming out full time early November of 2015 because the last kind of thing for me was coming out at work. I was pretty much out everywhere in my life but my job. We actually ended up breaking up a few weeks after that because the big piece was sexual orientation, attraction.
Mm.
Like I still identified as a heterosexual woman. I was beginning to identify as a lesbian, and I was attracted to her, but she wasn't like sexually attracted to me. Like she was still like romantically in love with me, but
Yeah.
that intimacy piece just like completely died.
Mm.
It just eventually the relationship kind of just fizzled out because
Yeah.
there's a big thing that was coming was Thanksgiving, and I had told her for a while that like I don't want to go to Thanksgiving with you unless you've told your family about me. And if you don't, that's fine. I just won't go with you.
Mm.
Um, and so this was in the few weeks after I'd come out at work, and then I came out on Facebook, and I was like, I'm out everywhere, so I'm not gonna go back in the closet to go to Thanksgiving for you or to go to
Boundaries.
Thanksgiving with my family because that was an expectation from my dad at the time. She was kind of like, I don't know if I want to tell them, and I'm like, I get it, it's a big thing.
Hmm.
And she did eventually tell them like right before Thanksgiving, but we kind of sat down and over the course of several days had some conversations where, I was essentially just like, look, we need to talk about this. Like, you're struggling to tell your family about me. We've been struggling to be intimate.
Mm.
And it just took several days to get through everything. So
Yeah.
most of it was us just like breaking down and crying.
Yeah.
Because we had both known, I think, for months that like this relationship is coming to an end sooner rather than later, and kind of just came to the point of us asking each other like, what does this mean? Are we breaking up? And I think I was the person who was just like, yeah, I think that's what's going to be best. But it was definitely a difficult thing to navigate because by the time
Hmm.
we'd broken up, we were together for over 2.5 years. So I mean, it was a serious relationship.
Yeah.
But thankfully, like, we didn't end on bad terms per se. It was just very complex.
Yeah.
It just was an incompatibility, for probably the simplest way to put it.
So Chloe, I'm curious, as someone who has transitioned, um, during a relationship, do you have any advice for people who may be going through a similar situation, either for the partner who is transitioning or for the partner who is not?
I mean, I think one of the biggest things is this is a transition for everyone. Like, it's obviously clearly a transition for the trans person, just emotionally, physically, even. But it's also a transition for their partner or partners because it's, you know, there's like a renegotiation of identity potentially. There's a renegotiation of like, well, what does this relationship mean now that this is a different constellation of genders involved
Hmm.
than what we had initially envisioned. Kind of like in my relationship is like, okay, we're in a relationship with a man and woman. Wait, now it's two women. What does that mean? What do
Hmm.
we do with that? And I think it's really important for everyone to try their best to be patient, like you had mentioned,
Yeah.
because it is such a big change and it can take a while to really process.
Hmm.
Um, and I think I would encourage, for those of you that are trans, try your best to be patient with partners as they are getting acclimated to, new appearances, a new name, new pronouns. It may take time for them to get all those things correct.
Hmm.
Obviously, check in with yourself and with them to gauge whether or not, the mistakes are unintentional or if
Hmm.
they're actually not supportive of you. That's, I think, super important to go with your gut and your instinct on that in terms of like your partner may be transphobic or your partner
Hmm.
may just never be willing to come around and may be mean about it. And I think it's important in this process because of that to find support systems outside of your partner in the case that things don't go well. Because I've honestly heard many stories like my own where maybe there wasn't animosity or bad blood that caused the relationship to end, but it was more so just an incompatibility because the attraction changed or went away. So finding that support, I think, can be really important to have other people to be able to talk to be able to vent to. Because we want our partners to be there for us, but it's also important for us outside of this to have other people we can talk to. Because we shouldn't expect our partner to be able to help us with every single thing in our lives, to be there for us for every single thing ever. Because that's an unfair expectation, I think. And that can get especially complicated if you throw something like transition in there too. Don't let a partner hold you back from being yourself either. If you know who you are and you know that transitioning is right for you, try your best to go with what is best for you, even if that means the hard choice of having to choose yourself over that relationship.
Beautifully said.
And it is.
Per the usual. Yeah. Well, and I think, like in your situation, you all went from a heterosexual presenting relationship to one with two women. And there's like shifts in power and privilege and all sorts of stuff that you all probably had to navigate. So I imagine it just takes a lot of patience on both people's parts. And like you said, reaching out outside of the relationship for support.
I truly believe life is too short to live a life that's not your own, live a life that isn't yours, that is somebody else's. And I think a key thing is transitioning is not selfish. It's about finally taking care of yourself for the first time, and finally, for many of us, it's the first time we really reflect as to what we want out of our lives and not what other people want. And self-care isn't selfish, and transitioning in many ways is a huge form of self-care, even though it is incredibly difficult, especially in the early stages. I can safely say that, like, as hard as it is, where I'm at now is the happiest I've ever been, because I can finally live and breathe and just exist in the world as me. And I think we all deserve to give ourselves at least a chance at doing that.
And that's a wrap.
Let us know what you think down in the comments below. What are your reactions or any ways that you can relate to my experiences? What was it like for you coming out in a relationship? As always, Tipsy and I, and maybe Cole, love you all.
Barely. Just barely.
And we hope that you are staying safe and healthy during this tough time. Give this a thumbs up, subscribe, hit that notification bell if you have not done any of that already. Bye for now.
Bye.